Welcome. In this tutorial, I'll be talking about working with a diptych. And if you're not familiar with what a diptych is, it's just two pieces that end up being one painting. You can frame them together in one frame or two separate frames hung together on the wall. I start out this piece with the top half of the paper wet. There's two small pieces, two 4 by 4 inch pieces that will end up being one unit. And I'm working with a pretty limited palette. The turquoise in the back is a Grumbacher turquoise that I'm using for the sky, and I'm using Payne's gray and the turquoise in the channel of water there. I try to pay attention that because it's a diptych, I want to show that the two pieces, there's a reason for them to be together. So as you can see, I'm purposely making a path between them so they are one unit. I work in the foreground a little bit dry to begin with, keeping in mind that this is a very small piece. These two are small individual pieces, so I can't work too wet because it would just be a hot mess. Continuing to finish up my sky in the background, straight turquoise with water, pretty transparent there. Going to keep that relatively simple. With a small piece like this, I can't be too complicated with what I'm doing because there's such a small area to work within. So I work in the foreground with the Payne's gray and the turquoise, just getting that design set up. And as you see, the two are married together now. I have the water traveling through both pieces. So that's set up. That design is I like that, and that's going to be my composition's base. I come in with my phthalo yellow green from Grumbacher, and I'm coming in with a little bit of yellow ochre. I end up not using that too much. As I said before, my palette's pretty limited here. So coming in with a base wash and starting to layer the phthalo yellow green and taking the Payne's gray, using that center line to define my background line, and then coming into the shadows, trying to keep this really loose. I want this to be more of a wet on wet look than anything else, and then fanning out just ever so slightly in my sky to finish that off. I'm coming in a little bit drier with that same green. That's the only green I'm using in this piece. I do think the turquoise creeps into that green a little bit, which is a nice combination. The green and the turquoise together make for a really nice color. And now I'm just really manipulating the paint around with my composition. And the composition is happening as I'm going. I can see I'm changing my mind as I move along here. And the thing with diptychs, it makes for an interest, as opposed to just being a 4 by 8 painting. It's two 4 by 4s, which is, once it's finished up and matted and framed, it really looks good. I'm coming in now with the gray on gray and just getting some light touches throughout that I'll fan out left or right in a little bit. But that again is just giving me some highlights. I'm trying to keep the piece as smoky as I can, and continuing with that wet on wet look that I'm typically striving for. I'm going to go in a little bit drier now as I go because I'm getting closer to the finish. So I'm going to go in with just some highlights with that Payne's Gray and the Phthalo Green, and just doing some final touches on the shadows and so on. Trying to pay attention to any watermarks that are happening, possibly. I do also keep in mind that the pieces, if separated in a frame, I want them to stand alone and be able to be a decent composition on their own, so I pay attention to that. And I found in this piece, the right hand side, bottom left, I wasn't crazy about that little corner, and I thought if it was separated from the other one it would look a little bit off. So I'll probably change that ever so slightly. So keep that in mind when you're doing a diptych, that you want them to be able to stand independently on their own, but intended to be together as a unit. In other words, when you go to frame it, and if you're framing it separately, they'll be in two different frames. So you want the composition to be able to hold itself on its own in each individual little piece. So I thought that bottom left corner on that right piece was going to be an issue, so I'll change that in a moment. Hope that doesn't confuse you. So I'm going to need to go in and fan just a tiny bit. Going to probably bring a little bit more intensity into that green, and put the final touches to it, and that's where I will most likely change the that bottom left corner. Just cleaning up the water, that's the pigment that runs a little bit. And with small pieces like this, it's fun to play around with it because, you know, so much happens with a little stroke. And just coming in with those ever subtle touches to enhance the piece. And as I've said before, it doesn't take a lot to make an impression with a small piece. Coming in with a little more of that phthalo green. It's a really great green to work with if you haven't worked with it before. And it mixes well with so many other pigments. And this is where I'm going to start to work on that bottom left that's just kind of bugging me. So I'm going to extend that out just a little bit and make it of a little more interest in that right side. And exaggerate that shadow just a little bit on that piece. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I just thought it'd be fun to try something different with a diptych. So I hope you give it a try. I hope it encourages you to pick up a paintbrush and paint. And I hope to see you in the next painting, and I appreciate you following along on this journey of mine. And I hope it's encouraged you to paint. Have a wonderful day.